Have you ever stood in the shower and started having a conversation that hasn't even happened yet? You test different versions of yourself. You change your tone, your words, your timing. You imagine what they might say, then adjust your response before they even speak. And somehow, even after all that rehearsal, it still doesn't feel safe enough. Or maybe it's 2:47 a.m. You're lying in bed, eyes open, replaying a conversation from earlier. That one sentence, that one moment. Why did I say it like that? Did they notice? Did I sound stupid? People call this overthinking. They say you're too anxious, too in your head, too sensitive. But what if I told you this isn't a flaw in your personality? What if this is your brain doing something incredibly precise? Something designed to protect you from a kind of pain most people don't even realize exists. What you're experiencing has a name, and more importantly, it has a function. Inside your brain, there's a network called the Default Mode Network, or DMN. This system activates when you're not focused on the outside world, when you're daydreaming, reflecting, or in your case, running entire conversations in your head. But the DMN isn't just random noise. It's a simulation engine. It allows you to mentally step into the future, predict outcomes, and test different versions of reality without ever taking the risk in real life. Now combine that with something called the negativity bias. Your brain is evolutionarily wired to prioritize what could go wrong over what could go right. Because thousands of years ago, one social mistake, being rejected by your tribe, didn't just hurt your feelings, it threatened your survival. Modern neuroscience backs this up. Research from UCLA, led by Naomi Eisenberger, found that social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex. In other words, your brain doesn't treat embarrassment as just awkward. It treats it as danger. And then there's rejection sensitivity, a heightened ability to detect even subtle signs of disapproval. A pause in someone's voice, a slight change in their expression, a delayed reply to your message. To most people, these signals pass unnoticed, but your brain flags them as data. So what does your system do? It prepares, it simulates, it rehearses, it replays. Not because you're broken, but because your brain is trying to minimize social risk with surgical precision. You're not just thinking, you're running a predictive model of human interaction. 1. You rehearse before speaking. You don't just talk, you prepare. Before a simple conversation, your mind starts running scripts, different versions, different tones, different outcomes. You imagine what they might say, and you adjust yourself in advance, not because you enjoy it, but because somewhere deep inside, there's a quiet calculation happening. What version of me will be accepted? This doesn't come from nowhere. At some point in your past, your words didn't land safely. Maybe you were misunderstood. Maybe you were dismissed. Maybe you said something honest and it was met with silence, judgment, or even ridicule. Your nervous system learns something critical in those moments. Spontaneity is risky. Preparation is protection. So now, before you speak, your brain builds a buffer. It tries to remove uncertainty. It tries to eliminate the possibility of rejection before it even exists. Over time, this stops being something you do and becomes something you are. You don't see it as a strategy anymore. You see it as your personality. I'm just someone who thinks a lot before speaking. But underneath that identity is a much deeper truth. You are someone who learned that being unfiltered once came with a cost.
2. You replay conversations after the end. The conversation's over, but for you, it isn't. Hours later, sometimes days, you're still inside it, reconstructing every sentence, analyzing every pause, zooming in on that one moment that felt slightly off. Why did I say that? I should have said this instead. Did they notice something was wrong with me? This isn't just reflection. It's cognitive replay under threat detection. Your brain is scanning the past for errors because it believes those errors could affect your future safety. From a neuroscience perspective, this is your default mode network looping with your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for detecting threats. And here's the part most people miss. Your brain is not trying to torture you. It's trying to learn. It's asking, what went wrong? How do we prevent that next time? Because in your internal model of the world, mistakes aren't neutral. They're signals that something could go wrong socially. So your mind keeps replaying the moment, not to shame you, but to refine you. And eventually, you internalize this too. I'm someone who overanalyzes everything. But in reality, you are someone whose brain refuses to leave social outcomes to chance.
3. You edit yourself mid-conversation. Sometimes you're in the middle of speaking and you stop. Not externally, but internally. You feel it, that sudden hesitation, that microsecond pause where your brain interrupts. Don't say that. Change it. That might sound weird. So you adjust. You soften your words. You reshape your sentence halfway through. To the outside world, it looks like you're just being thoughtful. But inside, something else is happening. You are monitoring yourself in real time. This is a form of hyperactive prefrontal regulation, where your brain is constantly filtering your expression before it reaches the surface. Why? Because at some point, expressing yourself freely didn't feel safe. Maybe your emotions were too much. Maybe your thoughts were too different. Maybe your authenticity was met with confusion instead of connection. So your system adapted. It created a rule. Before you say anything, make sure it won't cost you. And over time, that rule became automatic. Now you don't just speak, you translate yourself. You convert your raw thoughts into something more acceptable, more digestible, less risky. And eventually, this becomes part of your identity. I'm just not good at expressing myself. But the truth is far more complex. You are not bad at expressing yourself. You are highly trained at protecting yourself while doing it. 4. You feel safer in your head than in real life. In your mind, conversations flow better. You say the right things, people respond the way you hoped, everything feels controlled. But in real life, there are too many variables, too many unknown reactions, too many things you can't predict. So without even realizing it, you start to prefer the internal world. Not because you want to isolate yourself, but because your internal world feels safer. This is where your simulation system becomes a refuge. Inside your mind, no one interrupts you, no one misinterprets you, no one rejects you unexpectedly. Everything unfolds within parameters you can manage. And that sense of control is not trivial. For a nervous system that has learned to associate unpredictability with discomfort, control equals safety. So you stay there longer. You think more than you speak. You imagine more than you act. And eventually, this becomes a quiet belief. I'm better in my head than I am in real life. But that belief is not a flaw. It's a reflection of how precisely your brain has learned to create psychological safety when the external world didn't always provide it. And when you step back and look at all of this together, the rehearsing, the replaying, the editing, the retreat into your inner world, it starts to form a pattern, not of weakness, but of adaptation, not of dysfunction, but of intelligence under pressure. So maybe it's time to tell the truth differently. Not the version you've been repeating to yourself that you're too much or too quiet or too in your head, but the version your nervous system has known all along. You didn't become this way by accident. You became this way because at some point your environment required precision. It required awareness. It required you to read between the lines, to anticipate reactions, to calculate outcomes before they unfolded. And your brain adapted, not casually, not imperfectly, but brilliantly. Because what you call overthinking is actually your mind running high-level social simulations at a speed most people aren't even aware of. What you call being awkward is actually your system trying to optimize connection while minimizing risk. What you call not being yourself is actually a part of you that learned safety comes before authenticity. And that part of you, it's not your enemy. It's a protector that just never learned when the danger was over. But here's the shift. You don't need to destroy this part of you. You don't need to fix it, because this isn't a defect. This is a skill that was built in an environment where being unprepared had consequences. So instead of asking, "How do I stop doing this?" ask something more precise. When is this protecting me, and when is it holding me back? Because the goal is not silence. The goal is flexibility. To know that you can prepare, but you don't always have to. To know that you can analyze, but you don't always need to relive. To know that you can filter yourself, but you are also allowed to exist unrehearsed. And maybe, for the first time, you begin to see this differently. Not as a cage, but as a system that was trying to keep you safe in a world that didn't always feel safe to be in. So no, you are not socially broken. You are not bad at being human. You are someone whose brain learned to think before it trusts. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you aware. It makes you adaptive. And in the right environment, with the right people, it can become something even more powerful. Not just protection, but precision in connection. So if you've been carrying this quiet weight, this constant need to rehearse, to review, to get it right before you're allowed to just be, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. You didn't become this way because something is wrong with you. You became this way because somewhere along the line, your mind learned to adapt privately. While everyone else was just talking, you were learning how to navigate people. While others were making mistakes out loud, you were learning how to avoid them silently. And no one saw that, but that doesn't make it any less real. There are more people like you than you think. People who live entire conversations in their head before they ever speak them out loud. People who feel everything, but only show a fraction of it. People who aren't disconnected, just carefully calibrate it. And if that sounds like you, then you're not alone here. You've just found your people. So I want to ask you something, not as a test, but as a moment of honesty. Have you always felt like your mind rehearses life before you live it? If you have, drop a comment below. I read every single one. Not to analyze you, but to remind you there's nothing wrong with the way you adapted. And if this resonated with you, there's another piece you might need to understand next. Why your brain won't let you relax even when nothing is wrong. Because sometimes the system that protects you also forgets how to turn itself off. And that's where we go next.